Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hash Rate. My name is Mark Jeffrey. My guest today is Maciej. Did I get that right, Maciej?
Yeah, Maciej.
So no, but you're going to be kind.
It's close.
I tried. I'm so sorry. I did the best I could. I'm an American. What can I do, right? So today we're going to do a very a show I've been wanting to do for a while. Everybody in the Bittensor ecosystem, no matter how smart they are, is they find that they don't understand the details of exactly what's happening with the emissions and what the effect of the halvening is probably going to be, because it's a complex topic. The emissions are what exactly is happening under the hood. There are a lot of moving pieces. So Maciej is someone who is known in the community to really understand this stuff in great detail. So let's just dive right in. So like Bitcoin, Bitcoin emits new Bitcoins every block and pushes them out to the miner who guesses the hash of the previous block. Bittensor is also doing that, but its criteria for what it pushes emissions to is far more complicated. So at the moment, we've just crossed the 200-day line of when TAO launched just yesterday. And by my reading of this chart, 60% of the emissions, the TAO emissions, are currently going to alpha holders, and 40% is going to root. Did I get that much right so far?
So technically, 0% go to root. Because what happens is all the TAO emissions are going to subnets, and then later on, there's the process of root proportion that is selling alpha for TAO. So it's not really that the emissions are going to root. It's just that root sells alpha for TAO. So it's like a different topic.
I understand. So I'm off to a great start. I got the first question wrong already. So, So basically 100% of emissions, TAO emissions, go to alpha staker or to alpha holders. However, it is immediately sold by the chain into TAO, which is then given to the root stakers at a rate of 40% of the emissions, and 60% remains with the alpha stakers. So far, so good?
I understand what you are talking about. No. So essentially, you have the TAO emissions. The TAO emissions are going into the pool of every subnet based on their emission rate. So for example, Truths is, I think, something like 10%. And they are getting 10% of the 1 TAO per block. What you are talking about is the alpha emissions in the subnet and how they are distributed. So right now, based on the root proportion being somewhere about 30 to 40%, 40% of the alpha emissions are going to root and they are being sold for TAO. And 60% of alpha emissions are going to the alpha holders. The TAO that is being distributed to every subnet is not going to the holders. It's being it stays in the pool and it's ownerless. What the tokens that are in the pool are not owned by anybody. You could say they are owned by the chain.
Yes, it's liquidity on the on-chain Uniswap. That's basically baked into the Bittensor universe. And from what I can, so let's move on. So my understanding is there's two kinds of emissions. There's TAO emissions, and then there's alpha emissions. And so let's talk first of all about the pool. There are multiple parties that get emissions for various things. The first one we're going to talk about is the liquidity pools in the on-chain Uniswap that powers the Bittensor TAO universe. And in that universe, the liquidity pools, for every block, my understanding is every block, 1 TAO is emitted and 2 alpha tokens are emitted into the pool. Is that correct?
No. It's one TAO and between 0 and 1 alpha.
Okay. And what determines that? What determines between 0 and 1?
So the alpha injected in the pool is being decided by the TAO emissions divided by the alpha price. So so the best case scenario in a balance injection would be if your emissions are exactly the same as your alpha price. So if your price is 0.10 and your alpha and your TAO emissions are 0.10, because it's 10%, then you will get exactly 1 alpha injected. If your price were to be higher, let's say your subnet is in relation to your emissions overpriced or has a higher price, then you would get less alpha injected. And that's basically how it's determined based on the balance between the alpha price and emissions, the TAO emissions, if you get 1 alpha or if you get less up to 0 or like below 0.
Okay, so basically it's a variable rate, and it's based on the price. If I got that right,
the TAO emissions and the price, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So my understanding is that changes if. So the sum of all subnets is a concept that a lot of people, that we all talk about a lot, right? So that means that if you add up one alpha token from each subnet, all 128, that should equal 1 tau. Now, it doesn't ever exactly equal it. At the moment, last time I checked, it was like 1.1 tau, something like that, correct?
I think it's like 1.05, 1.02.
Okay, so it's even lower than the last. I checked like a week ago.
Yeah.
So what happens if that dips below, the sum of all subnets dips below 1? The chain kind of goes into a shock state where it actually changes the emissions, correct?
Yes. So basically how it works is that one thing that has to be clarified. This is called the subsidy mechanism, and it works per subnet. So we normally talk about the sum of prices, and if the sum of prices is above 1 or below 1, then that happens. This is just a generalization to make the idea of understanding how the subsidy mechanism works easier, because if the sum of prices is below 1, then we can guarantee that some of the subnets will be subsidized. What happens when a subnet is subsidized is that its emission is not balanced. So essentially we are adding more tau into the pool, but with V3, it was changed to essentially use the additional tau from the emissions as buying pressures. So essentially it will stake that tau into the pool, alpha gets out, and that alpha is being burned.
Alpha is being bought back. So the chain is actually buying alpha. Is that correct?
Exactly. And that pushes the price up. So essentially the subsidy mechanism wants to encourage the sum of prices to be at 1 or above, ideally.
Yeah. Okay. So the chain basically goes, oh my God, the prices are too low. So the chain, am going to be the buyer of last resort, and I'm going to just buy using tau, the alpha token, which will push its price up, right? Because more buying equals price goes up, right? So
yes,
supply and demand. So that's what happens.
The clarifying point is it will not buy every subnet. It will only buy those subnets that have a lower price than their TAO emissions.
Got it. Okay.
So basically, you can think of it when your price is above your emissions, then you will get less injection. So it's kind of like a punishment. It's like you will get less liquidity into your pool. And if your price is below your emissions, then the chain will subsidize you and give you buy pressure. So you could think of it like an act of wanting to represent the prices as the TAO emission of the subnet.
Okay. So before we leave the topic of liquidity pool emissions, does this dynamic change after the halvening at all, or will it basically will these numbers remain the same?
So essentially, what changes with the TAO halving is the TAO block emission. So instead of 1, it will be 0.5, and what it will change is that the liquidities of all the subnets will grow with half of the amount of tokens being injected, because the alpha injected into the pool is also being affected by the TAO block emission. So at the moment of the halving, the maximum TAO block emission will be 0.5 if you would have all the emissions, and the maximum alpha injection will be between 0 and 0.5. So both TAO and alpha injection will get halved, and that means that any new subnet ports, for example, that would register post the halving would not be able to, or like would need twice the time to get the same liquidity as subnets that exist today.
Oh, very interesting. Okay, so all right, so let me try to repeat back to you. So at the Halvening, which is in December, the TAO emissions will be chopped in half, so 0.5 TAO, and that then also the alpha emissions going into the pool, because I think it's different for other things, but just talking about just the pool.
Just because you say, I think it will much be easier also for the people. There's alpha injected, or like alpha injection. Injection clarifies that those tokens go to the pool. And then there's emission, which clarifies that those tokens will go to the participants. So injection, emission, I think that's easier to...
Understood. Thank you. I did not actually understand that difference. So thank you. That was those terms. I've heard those terms, but I didn't know specifically what each one meant. Okay. So injected means new tokens that are printed by the chain, but they go into the pool. They don't go to anybody out there. They just go into the pool. Whereas emissions go to the people out there for various things. That's sort of the distinction here. Okay. So at the Halvening, the injected alpha will also be chopped in half, and just basically to keep the pool, the balance between the amount of TAO and alpha tokens that are being injected. You don't actually want to change the price. Like if you just have the TAO, that would like throw the pool out of whack, and you don't want that. So we want to keep the balance. So basically, both of them get chopped in half at the same time. So that makes sense.
The TAO halving is neutral, or like the halvings in themselves are neutral to the alpha prices.
Yes. Okay. And because of this, because of that dynamic now. Any subnets launching kind of post December, let's just say January or February, they have a steeper uphill climb because it will take them twice, because of the Halvening, it will take them twice as long to boot up the same liquidity as all the older subnets. So it's the 128 that are up and running right now are kind of golden children, right? They've been through the hard time of, they've had to wait to get their liquidity built up, right? And the people who come along later, it's going to be harder for them to catch up to build up the same kind of liquidity, right? Okay.
Yes, so because if you think about it, for example, after 5 TAO halvings, the liquidity will be 32 times less. So they will need 32 times more to get to the same liquidity. So essentially, the earlier you start your subnet and you survive, because the registrations will coming back, if you are able to survive as a early slot, that would be very valuable long term.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about the other parties that get emissions, to use the term correctly, not injections, but emissions. So based on my understanding, there's 4 other parties. So the first one, let's talk about the first one. The first one is the subnet owner. Subnet owner gets what? Gets TAO or gets alpha?
All participants get alpha. Just that is like to the first one that we can like be sure about.
And where does that alpha come from? Is it emitted as TAO and then sold for alpha and then given to the subnet owner? Is that how it works?
No. So essentially, for example, because people were always confused at the beginning, like, why is there 2 alpha and 1 TAO? Like, that's like twice as much, and dilution and stuff like that. But it's the interesting fact is that it's not like the alpha block emission is not 2. It's also 1. But that 1 alpha is being distributed at 2 places, to the pool and to the participants. So it's not actually 2 alpha block emission, it's 1 that is being distributed at 2 places. And and the 1 alpha that we are talking about now goes to subnet owner, holders, and the miners and validators.
Okay, so let me try to recapitulate. So with every block, 1 TAO is emitted. 2 TAO are both emitted and injected. One of them gets injected. Sorry, did I say that right? There's 2 alpha tokens that get emitted / injected. Yes. One of them gets injected. The second one gets emitted and is divided up amongst the validators, the miners, anyone else who's holding it. That's how that happens. Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, finally, I got something right. Oh my God. Okay, I think I'm starting to understand this. So which is why I'm doing this with you. So okay. So all right. So we got that. So we're basically figuring out how to divvy up that one alpha token that's being emitted. So the subnet owner gets a chunk of that, and I forget what the ratios are.
The subnet owner gets 18%.
18%. So okay, so 18. So there's one. So 0.18 of that one alpha token goes to the subnet owner, and that's how. And it's printed up, so it's brand new. It's not purchased with TAO or anything. It's just emitted alpha, goes right to the subnet owner. Then there's the alpha alpha holders. So these are people who have staked TAO to a validator and are now, and I'm just a holder. So I also get what, 18.18 of that alpha as well?
If I can recommend, I would talk about the holders and the validators last, because that's like a little bit more complicated. So like we could talk about the miner part first.
Well, got it. So let's shelve that. Let's talk about the miner. So what does the miner get?
The miners are getting 41%.
Right, which makes sense. They're doing the work. The miners are the people we got to keep the happiest. So 41%, 0.41% of that one alpha token that's emitted, that gets divided up amongst the miners, right? And what does that division look like? Well, it depends on the criteria set up by the subnet owner to figure out how to divide rewards. But in general, whoever does the mining work the best, the fastest, gets the majority, maybe even all of that 0.44 alpha token, right?
41.
Okay. 41. Sorry. Yes. 0.41. Okay. Now we're on to the validators. So what do the validators get?
Yeah. So if you add the 18% and 41% together, you get 59. And if you divide, and if you look how much remains, then it would be 41. So essentially, the way how it works is that the subnet owner and the subnet owner gets his 18%. Now you remove the subnet owner from the equation, and you have left 82%. Those 82% are being divided equally into 41 to miners and validators. Essentially, the validators and for validating the work are getting 41%, and miners for doing the work are getting 41%. And then from that 0.41 alpha distributed to the validators are of course based on their alpha stake contribution, are forwarding those dividends to the holders. Now, the critical point there is that the root proportion of a subnet determines how much goes to alpha holders and how much goes to root holders, or like root nominators. Essentially, the way how it's calculated is that you look at the alpha supply of the subnet and you look at the amount of TAO staked to root. And the lower the supply, the more the root proportion is. So at the beginning, when the subnet is new, the supply is 1 alpha, then root proportion will be 100%. So at the beginning of the subnet, root will get all the 41% of the validators. And then over time, as the alpha supply of a subnet increases, the root proportion drops, and root nominators will get less and less of the alpha, and more will go to the actual alpha holders.
Okay, so that's that 60-40% thing I was talking about at the beginning of the show.
Exactly.
Right, that graph. Yeah, so we're at the 200-day mark. So when a new subnet is born, like, first moments of life, 100% of the alpha emissions go to the root stakers. They just get it. That's how the whole thing works. And then over time,
100% of the alpha emissions for the validators. So not because if you say alpha emissions, it would mean all of the 1 alpha, but it's just all of the 41% of the 1 alpha.
Got it. Okay, I understood. Got it. The great distinction. Okay, so but over time, that curve starts going down, and the amount going to the validators and alpha holders goes up. And at the moment, we've sort of crossed this line at the 200-day mark where 60% of the 41% goes to the alpha holders and validators, correct?
Yes.
I finally got another one right. Okay. So, and then 40% goes to root stakers. So root stakers are still sort of sliming along, getting some stuff. And there's some debate about whether that's good or bad, but whatever. This is how it works right now. So, okay. And then, just to sort of complete the picture and the validators do not all equally get, they don't all get an equal cut of that 41%. They get a pro rata amount of it based on the amount of alpha holders that have staked their alpha token, their TAO, to that particular validator. So it's another contest. It's basically, who do the alpha holders think of as great validators? Who are they backing? And whoever gets the most backing, if you will, through staking of TAO to that validator, the validator then gets rewarded for being popular and being regarded as legitimate and doing a good job within the system. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Got another one right. Okay, we're moving along here. Okay, is there anybody else who gets anything in either emissions or injection at this point, or have I covered everything?
No, that would cover everything.
Okay. All right, moving along.
Yeah, one thing that, because I think that's something we forgot, but we mentioned it, but I just want to, for the context, to repeat that. When you divide the alpha dividends, so like the 41% of the one alpha, and you give it to the validators, and let's say the root proportion is 40%. That would mean 40% of that goes to root. And they earn alpha, but the chain automatically is selling that alpha for TAO, then it is accumulating the TAO, and after every 72 minutes, it's paying out that TAO to the root nominators, while the 60% of alpha remain alpha and will be distributed to the alpha holders. So technically, root is not earning TAO, they are earning alpha, but it's just being automatically sold.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so the root is so right, because root does not collect. If I'm staking TAO to root, I'm earning TAO.
Yes.
So the question is, if the chain is emitting alpha, that doesn't match up, because I'm earning TAO. So
if you think about it, if you earn TAO, but the chain only injects the TAO into the pools, where do you get your TAO from?
Right, where does it come from? Right, exactly. So the answer is that the chain is automatically selling the alpha tokens on behalf of the root stakers to give so they can now be rewarded in TAO, denominated in TAO. I get TAO in my wallet. Yes. And that's how that happens. So that creates some sell pressure on the alpha tokens. So that's bad for alpha holders, right? Because their prices go down if there's too much of this happening. And that, there's a lot of people who complain that, right now, basically in the sort of first year of DTAO's existence, that sell pressure is artificially, the chain is basically fighting against everyone who's an alpha holder in terms of price, right? So people are like, oh my God, the chain's dumping on my head, which is true. However, the way I've heard, but the flip side of that is that everybody's making roughly 80% APY. Depends on which alpha they're holding, but the APY is very high right now that everybody's getting, right? So if you look at the chain dumping on your head versus the emissions, after a year, it more or less averages out. That's sort of been my observation, and Siam has said that, and I think even Const has said that. So
yeah, and
is that your view as well, roughly?
Yeah. So I think also I have seen of one of the websites. It was called dtaostats.io from the people of Subnet 29. I think they showed the APY compared to the price change over a given time range, and it has shown that the APY is higher than the price changes were, for example, in the last month and something like that. So
oh wow!
So essentially, it already kind of is in that state where holding from the dividends would be better than is better in terms of that than the price changes. Because right now also the prices don't change as much anymore. Like we had some prices at 4 and it dropped to 1, but now we are at 1 and it kind of stays right now at 1 also.
Right, which is what it's designed to do. It's designed to create that prices equal 1 equilibrium. And if you look at, like, so there's a lot of people who are sort of new to TAO and Bittensor coming into the space are like, what the fuck? Look at all this stuff. Why? You know, it looks like a murder board, right? Like how all these emissions and things work, right? Like it's so complicated. And people are like, well, why is it like this? And for those who don't know, my understanding is the reason why is because you want the liquidity to boot up slowly over time so that when a new subnet is born, you don't have some whale come in there and just gobble up all the cheap tokens, you know, and leave none for everyone else and then just forever control the supply of a subnet's tokens because it boots up in this kind of painful, hard way over a year, maybe more as the chain ages, right? Because it becomes harder to boot up liquidity. It's hard, but it's fair. And this basically gives everyone a chance to come in and get cheap subnet tokens fairly. Like nobody really has an advantage, right? So that's the reason. That's the why behind this. And I actually think it quite admirably creates this fair launch environment. It's painful, but you know it's only a year of pain. And I think once sort of February-ish, maybe at the Halvening, things will sort of kick around into a new phase. Konst describes this as like a year-long ICO phase. And I think that's a pretty good way to think about it. It's not actual sort of price discovery. And I think sort of after the Halvening, that's when we'll actually start to see real price discovery. So what that means is, and this is just my opinion, but this is what I think, that means we're in this sort of magical time where the prices are artificially low. It kind of like when you could go to Mt. Gox and buy Bitcoin for $1, right? And we all look back on that as like this magical time, like, oh my God, I was so dumb. I should have like loaded up back then, right? And right now, I think we're sort of in that same phase. My personal opinion is we're in that same phase with, not all subnets, but a lot of them, where we'll look back on this moment as sort of a magical moment in time. Anything you disagree with there?
No. So what I could add to that, and just give some story of TAO before it launched, is one thing. Why is there this root cell pressure, and is it only bad? So what it kind of wants to do is to make manipulation of prices at the beginning, because the liquidity is so low, expensive. So when at the beginning 100% of the dividends are being sold, that creates selling pressure. And if you would be some malicious owner who says he wants to pump his own price, the liquidity is really low, he can do that. He pumps his price. His price is 2,000 TAO per alpha, and now he gets all the emissions. And it would just be like a game of that. So essentially, what the root proportion does is it makes it expensive. It makes it not profitable really for the owner to put a lot of TAO into his pool while the liquidity is low, because he will lose most of it through slippage, and his price will not really stay where it was. So essentially, it like tries to eliminate that. The second aspect is that root proportion is controlling or lowering the APY for the alpha holders. Because if you were to give them all 100% at the beginning with that small amount of alpha that they have, and they are getting 0.41 alpha every block, that would be insane APY. There was some graph that Cons has once shared in the route channel, and they showed how the APY would look like in the first year, depending on the root proportion, or like the weight of the root proportion. And I think if there would be no root proportion at all, or like everything would go to alpha nominators, it would be like 10,000 API or something. I don't know. It would have been it would have been insane. So that's the two aspects. And the third one that I see as something that root proportion does, I would say good, kinda even, is that root proportion, by selling alpha, is adding more alpha to the pool. So how one has to look at it is it provides more liquidity. It makes your pool more stable from future selling pressure. Because if there would be no root proportion, your pool would only get what is being injected. But with the root selling pressure, it gets what's injected and the alpha dividends at the beginning. So it gets almost 50% more injection. And that means the liquidity will be higher, and thus in the future when miners will sell, the price impact from them will be lower.
Got it. Okay. I'm gonna rewatch this episode like 2 or 3 times, just so you know. Right. And I'm gonna try to work it all out. And, yeah.
So that's for the points of why do we have that? Why is the root pressure there? Why is it selling on me? But when one goes into the history of DTAO and like the previous designs before DTAO really got out into mainnet, there were different designs how DTAO worked. And actually, the one we have right now is I would say, the version with the most freedom, or like the most changes by the market, because the previous designs, one of them, for example, worked that way, where if the sum of prices was higher than 1, so let's say the sum of prices would be at 1.5, then the chain would stop emitting tau. And then only alpha would be emitted, meaning the chain will only emit alpha, decreasing all the prices. Once the sum of prices would have been below 1, the chain would only emit tau. So now the prices increase.
Oh, wow.
And that would have created some fluctuation, but over time it would have converged to a sum of prices of 1. And that's where the whole idea of sum of prices of 1 comes from. That's why this idea was talked about so much previously, because the chain was intended to, I would say, manipulate the prices in a way that it would have been a sum of prices of 1. But later on, it was decided to make it more free, to let the market decide what the prices should be and to not limit them. Because with the previous design, the sum of prices would have been limited at 1, essentially. Because once it would have been above that, the chain would not emit any tau, and then the prices would be doomed forever to go down. But right now, with the root proportion, it's only in the beginning. At some point in 2 or 5 years, the root proportion will be at 3% or something, and then there will be no sell pressure effectively from the chain anymore.
Wow. So there was almost a much more hardcore version of enforcing sum of subnets equals 1, where I think
people don't realize what they got.
Yeah. This is the happier world version, right? So, it's sort of inclined to push things to 1, but it's not hardcore enforcing it and actually manipulating the market to make sure it's always true. It just sort of tends that direction.
Yes,
so
it encourages it, but over time, let's say in 50 years, when the root proportion will be much, much lower, who knows where the prices could be effectively, what the market decides on. And also the subsidy mechanism that is providing buy pressure, it actually goes away also over time, because the TAO block emission decreases, and so does the buy pressure from the chain. So right now, it's like kind of when you play bowling and you have those guardrails. Like that's what happens right now. Like the ball is being balanced to kind of stay where it is. But as DTAO will get older, those guardrails will get removed, and then it's up to the market to decide what happens.
Wow, that's great color. Thank you for that. Okay, so let me ask you sort of a practical question. I don't know if you'll know the answer to this or not. So looking at this as an investor in subnets, sort of my initial question was, all right, so I know that the chain is emitting alpha tokens every day into this pool, as well as tau. How much am I getting diluted on a daily basis from these emissions? In other words, what is if I'm a venture capitalist, there's basically the chain is emitting new investors, if you will, every day. So, and I'm only talking about the circulating supply. That's the only thing I'm interested in. What I did was I actually, over the course of several weeks, every day I would write down, okay, what's the circulating supply today? Okay, what's the circulating supply at the same time tomorrow, right? And just sort of observed it. And my observation is on average, most subnets right now are diluting the market, the circulating supply at a rate of about 0.5% of the circulating supply per day. Does that number feel right to you, or do you know or not?
So I have to say I am not good in economics. I just know the technicals very good. And how I understand dilution is that essentially, let's say if we talk about alpha, that my alpha will be worth less. Is that how I understand it correctly? Like what essentially, because that's how I always, when I look up dilution, I'm like, what are those people about when they talk about dilution? And how I essentially understand it in like when I Google it, basically, what the definition says. It says
So basically, like, if I invest $100 and you come along and invest $100, I have been diluted 50% because now the total market cap is 200, right? So my observation has been, let's just say that the circulating supply of alpha is 100 tokens. I come back tomorrow at the same time, that circulating supply is now 100 and a half of a alpha token every day. There's another half of an alpha token added every day.
Okay, I understand. Yeah, so I don't know. That could be. I haven't looked at that myself. But essentially, how I always thought of it is if, like, let's say nobody stakes into it, like if you just have that one alpha being emitted, what normally should be important for you is just the alpha being held. So like the alpha outside of the pool. Because the alpha inside the pool doesn't dilute you, except somebody stakes into it. They take alpha out of the pool and add it to the bunch with you, because then that would dilute you, because now there's more alpha that has come in and you haven't got anything from that. But if you just would have 100 participants in a subnet and nobody stakes into it after that, and they would just get the dividends and stuff, then there would be no dilution for them. The ones diluted would be the miners, because they are not getting any APY when they are staking the rewards, like the incentives that are getting. But yeah, I don't know the exact number that would be. I haven't looked at that myself.
Okay, let's talk now about the halvening, because some of the other conversations I've had with subnet owners, they're basically wondering, they're kind of like, okay, right now, I'm barely staying afloat, right? And when the halvening comes along, that's going to chop my subsidy in half, right, by definition. So, first of all, is that the case? Is basically, I guess that, sorry, let me start somewhere else. So the alpha tokens are actually on a different halvening schedule overall than TAO. Is that correct? Yes. That's my understanding. Okay, so that is correct.
Because
and so that means
if you compare it with Bitcoin has like a static kind of halving where it's depending on the block number. The way how the halvings work on Bittensor and on the alpha or like the subnets is that they depend on the issuance. So that could vary because you have tokens being recycled, you have tokens not being recycled, and also the injection changes. Sometimes it could be 0, it could be 1. So you have some kind of estimate of when a halving could happen, but you don't know really when it happens. And that's for the subnets. That's for the alpha subnets. For TAO itself, it's much simpler now after DTAO, because before DTAO, you had alpha being recycled that was sent to the root network. Then you had alpha being recycled from the miner registrations, and all like the different things that changed how much alpha is really being emitted, like the net alpha, the net TAO. I'm sorry. And now it's much more closer to just one. Like there's the only thing that is recycling TAO at the moment are the subnet registrations. Miner registrations are not recycling TAO anymore. There is no more root network that is recycling TAO. So the only thing are the subnet registrations, and as we know right now, there are none.
Yeah, there's none.
Yeah, so essentially, like right now, there's one TAO being emitted per block, and that's why one can very easily estimate when the halving of TAO will happen. For subnets, it's different, but as every subnet has a different supply, because I created mine subnet today, and someone created his subnet 6 months ago. So the supply will be different, and thus the timing of the halving.
Right. So if you just created a new subnet today, your halvening is like roughly a year out, right? For your alpha tokens. I'm not sure if it's exactly a year, but something like that. So
the alpha halving, because it's essentially, if you put it together, how much alpha goes into the pool, it's between 0 and 1, and then you have 1 alpha being emitted, then you get 1 up to 2 alpha per block. And that means between 7,200 and 14,400 alpha every day. So you get an average of 10,000 alpha, and that means about 2.5 years until the first alpha halvings.
Okay, sorry, my mistake. I should have known that. Okay, got it. So, and that doesn't include, right? No, I understand what you're saying. So, okay, let me think about my next question here. I had somewhere I was going with this. Oh, I know where I want to go next. So you used the term recycling, and recycling. The first time I've encountered it in crypto was in Bittensor, and so there is no recycling in Bitcoin, right? Like that doesn't happen.
Yes.
There's no recycling in Ethereum, right? Like you just burn fucking Ethereum as gas, and that's it, right? So it goes away, and then there's other Ethereum that gets emitted, right? So when you say recycle, you have this dynamic where when somebody spends TAO with the chain to register a new subnet, or I guess register as a miner as well. There's a couple ways in which you spend TAO. You basically give TAO to the chain, and the chain goes, "Okay, you have a subnet now. Here you go." If that spent TAO doesn't actually, it's not burnt. Like the chain doesn't burn it. The chain just sort of puts it in a little bucket and goes, "Okay, at some point in the future, I'm going to re-emit this or re-inject this. This goes into my pile. I don't have to print new TAO since I've got this like pile of TAO that people have given me for various things. I'm going to at some point use this and push it out as an injection or an emission." Did I get that correct?
Almost.
Okay, go ahead.
I would just like to add more detail to like really make it clear how that will work. So before DTAO, there was TAO recycling. That was, as I mentioned recently, like shortly before. The way how TAO recycling worked is that any TAO or like any weights that was set to root by the root validators, all the TAO emissions would go to root, and that amount of TAO would be recycled. So essentially the root validators before DTAO had the power to decide, we don't want 1 TAO per block to be emitted to the subnets. We don't think they deserve all of the 1 TAO. We will get 40% of it to root. That will be recycled. Let's put it back. And the 0.6 TAO then would be distributed to subnets. We don't want to give them the full amount of 1 TAO. The second way how TAO recycling worked was when miners, or like essentially any neuron registered on Bittensor. So neurons could be a miner or a validator. So like some entity that wants to register themselves into a subnet. And it has a TAO cost. And before, that cost was being recycled. So if one would have added up all the registrations from every subnet, that would have also pre-DTAO gotten like 2,000, maybe 1,000 TAO. So from those 7,000, 1/7 of that would have been recycled every day. Those two ways of recycling don't exist anymore. The only way of to recycle TAO today, after DTAO, is when one registers a subnet. Let's say the registration cost is 100 TAO. Then I register my subnet with 100 TAO. 1 TAO of that goes into the pool to initialize the liquidity, and 99 of the TAO is being recycled. So essentially, always every subnet has to put 1 TAO out of the cost into the pool to initialize the liquidity of the subnet, because every subnet starts with 1 TAO, 1 alpha. So one could say it's pre-mined because there is 1 already, but it's essentially a pre-launch.
It's pre-mined. Yeah, 1 TAO. I don't know if I call 1 TAO. I mean, I guess technically it is, but hell of a stretch of the term pre-mined, though, but okay.
Yeah, so essentially, 99 of that TAO is then being recycled. How miner registrations work these days, or like any neuron registrations, is that the TAO, let's say I have to pay 1 TAO, that 1 TAO is being staked into the pool, alpha is being taken out, and that alpha is being recycled. So miner or validator registrations are recycling alpha. And what they actually do, because as I said, they stake TAO into the pool and they removed alpha, miner registrations and validator registrations increase the price by a bit.
Okay.
So now the recycling has shifted to alpha. And how recycling actually works is it's you could say it's kind of like a burn because those tokens are being deleted. But what also
they
happens,
are.
Those tokens are being deleted. So if I say, let's take the subnet registration example again. 1 TAO goes into the pool and 99 are being recycled. Those 99 TAO are being deleted and the chain essentially forgets about them because we also decrease the issuance by the 99 TAO. So the chain doesn't, it's like the chain forgot it ever emitted those 99 TAO.
Oh, okay. So when you say that's how recycling works. So there isn't like a pile somewhere like I described. There's no pile. There's just let's go edit how much we've emitted and like let's just erase them. Didn't happen.
And the chain then thinks, okay, we are back at the state we were 5 days ago or something. And the difference between recycling tokens and burning tokens is when you recycle, you delete them and you decrease the supply, the issuance. When you burn, you delete them, but the issuance stays the same. So essentially the chain deletes the tokens, but it thinks they are still there.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Thank you for that. Thank you for that explanation. Okay, so let me go back to a thought that I was going. I'm glad we did this little side road because I needed it. But let me try to go back to where I was going, which is at the halvening, and I'm talking about the TAO halvening coming up. The amount of alpha tokens. Well, first of all, is it true that at the TAO halvening, the subnet owners will be receiving half of the amount of alpha that they're getting right now, or is that not true?
At the TAO halving?
Yes.
No, the rewards for the participants, miners, validators, holders, and the owner are the same. Those will be the same until the alpha halving. The TAO halving is only changing the injection.
Okay, good. So basically, the subsidies that are sort of propping up. I don't mean that in a bad way. You know, Uber was propped up by subsidies for 10 years, right? Amazon was propped up by subsidies for 17 years. So not a horrible, dirty word, but they are subsidies. So there is a fear amongst a lot of subnet owners that I've talked to that, oh my God, what happens when the halvening happens? Does that mean like all of our miners get chopped in half in terms of what they're being paid? And that's going to kill my subnet. And what you're telling me is that's not, no, settle down. That's not true. That's not what's going to happen. Everything's basically going to remain the same. Correct?
Yes. Everything will remain the same. The only thing that will change is the injection. So that means that for any existing subnet and any new subnet that registers after the TAO halving, the liquidity provision, like the injected tokens, will be halved. But the price will remain balanced from the injection. The participants will still get the alpha block emission based on the alpha block emission that is based on the alpha issuance. So that doesn't change any rewards for miners, for holders, or for the owner. They get still the same.
Got it. Okay. And you actually answered, accidentally answered another question I was going to ask you. That actually just was going to be my next question. So I wasn't sure why, like, remember when we didn't have a subnet cap, right? It wasn't capped at 128. And, we had like, I don't know, 30 or 40 subnets, and all of a sudden it just zoomed up to 100, like almost overnight, right? Because everyone and their brother's like, oh my God, I got to make a subnet. So we had like, 60 subnets born in like a week, or not a week, but more like a month or two, something like that, right? It was pretty fast. And that sent the root APY to the moon. It was like 25% APY or something silly, right? And it had been like, I don't know, just like 18%, maybe 16%. And I'm like, why is the root APY going to the moon? And the reason why is because when a new subnet is born, 100%, that curve starts off with 100% of the injection. If I don't know if I'm just getting this right, but basically the root's getting the bulk of the rewards. Bottom line, that's what's happening.
So essentially, how one can think of it, why the root why the root API has gone up so much, is because there is a relationship between the sum of prices and the root API, especially in the beginning. Because when one looks at the beginning, the first month of the TAO, let's say, every subnet's root proportion was 100%, 99, 98, let's say just 100 for simplicity. So every of the 0.41 alpha was being sold for TAO. Now, what happens when the prices are very high, like a sum of prices at 4? That means that the alpha being sold is worth 4 times more than it's being worth now. So that means that the alpha that root is selling is worth more TAO, and that's why they are getting more TAO, so the APY is higher.
Got it. Okay. Well, so basically, if we uncap that 128, and we get like another 50 or 60 subnets born in a week, we're going to see that root APY shoot right back up again, right?
Because it could, but it's not necessarily what has to happen. Simply because of like how the market normally works. Like when one looks right now at emissions, also prices, I think the top 10 of subnets is getting 50% of the emissions, like the Pareto principle, right?
Yeah.
So any new subnet being created, they have the chance to have a high price. They have the chance to boost the APY, but it will be temporarily, simply because one, probably there's not as much demand, except any people want to speculate. But that's something I don't know if it will happen or not, but that could happen. And the second thing is that the selling pressure from root will drop the price very quickly because the liquidity is very low and the price impact will be very high. So anybody trying, as I said before, anyone trying to boost the price to get more emissions or to and essentially also kind of boost the root API, it will be very expensive for them because of the root selling pressure at the beginning. So one could say if there's enough demand for alpha and all those new subnets would attract the market in some way, then the root API could go up. But I personally assume that most of the market demand in the future and long term will probably be somewhere at the top 10, top 15, like gradually increasing towards the one with the most liquidity.
Got it. So basically the subnets that are sort of the blue chips and that are getting most of the rewards because their market caps are the highest will tend to remain, and sort of the new kids on the block will not generate the large amount of emissions like they did in the early days when there weren't any blue chips yet. We didn't know who was going to be popular and who wasn't. So I personally, because of TAO, are trying to learn more about economics and stuff like that. So that's why I know. That's why I know some of those things, but I'm not an expert in that. But essentially, what I always read is that the market is very inefficient at the beginning because of information asymmetry. So like people don't know yet what is good, what is bad. And also the liquidity, like a lot of participants, when one looks, for example, at the at root right now, there's still 6 million TAO on the root. And it's just because there's not enough liquidity, most likely, for a lot of bigger wallets to really join in yet. So as the market becomes more efficient, as there will be more demand and stuff like that, I think that it will become less Wild West than it was in the first months. Things could still happen, like there could still be a shift. I have read, for example, about how Yahoo was the best search engine in the 2000s, and then came Google with their much better algorithm that was using the Markov chain, and they said, okay,
Google tried to sell the algorithm to Yahoo, and Yahoo was like, nah, we don't want that. And now look where Google and Yahoo are now. So if you have a subnet that has an amazing idea, then there's a chance for you to go into the top. It's just for most, from the probability perspective, I think they will remain on the lower part probably.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's not impossible. I mean, we saw Ridges kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Right. Ridges. I don't think it existed 3 months ago. Right. Now it's number 2.
The thing with Ridges that I have been looking into also a bit is that essentially because they have a lower liquidity, any selling pressure that happens on their subnet has a much bigger price impact. So if I sell 1,000 alpha on Chutes and 1,000 alpha on Ridges will drop a lot more from that same alpha selling pressure. So that's like one part that is something that those subnets that are boosting on the top have to think about, or like what those people have to think about. But it's possible. We have seen that multiple times now. I think also Bitcast before also has gone up a lot. So anything is possible. If you have a good subnet, a good product, people see demand in it, then it will happen.
Yep. Okay. All right. Is there anything I should have covered here that I didn't cover in your view?
No, I think everything's so far.
We got it?
I think we got most of the part. I think one thing that I have also explained in one of my posts recently is about a subsidy mechanism, because a lot of people are asking that question in terms of we are right now very close to a sum price of 1. That's the bottom. Like it can't drop below. The chain buys the tokens. It's only up from here. It's possible that the sum of prices can drop below 1. This mechanism is not really I don't know. It's like it doesn't.
It's not perfect.
Yes, it's encouraging the sum of prices to be at 1 or above, but it doesn't guarantee that. So if the selling pressure compared to the buy pressure from the chain and the market, if the miners and participants sell more, then the prices will still go down. But what is very interesting is that as the people sell, the alpha prices drop. So the amount of TAO they are getting out of the pool is less and less and less. That means they are impacting the price less and less and less. And what happens on the opposite, as the prices decrease, the chain is buying more and more and more. So at some point, those will cancel out. And technically, if it would remain like that, then this would be the bottom. If one would run a simulation and calculate that, this would be like the essential bottom. If one simulates that 1 alpha, so all the emissions are being sold every block, when would they cancel out?
Got it.
The thing is, but I did such a simulation until the TAO halving, and I had to remove all the technical probable market buying pressure. So it was just the chain's buying pressure against the selling pressure from all participants. And I think where I got in this worst case scenario was like 0.7, 0.5 or something, sum of prices. And what was interesting and also logical, but worth noting, is that I created a visualization of the price changes on all the subnets, and I made two axes, one for the alpha price, that was the x-axis, and one for the liquidity, that was the y-axis. And what was interesting, for example, Chutes, it has a high price and it has high liquidity. It was on the top right, and its price change was only like 20%, minus 20%. But this is just to understand the relation. I'm not saying Chutes will never drop less than 20%.
Right.
And a subnet that was rather on the bottom right, so it had a high price but a low liquidity, that subnet experienced a price change of minus 80%. So much more.
Yeah.
And the interesting sweet spot was to have a low price high liquidity. Those subnets experienced the least price change. And interestingly, it had a lower price change than truths. So I think the best one had minus 18%. So it's just 2% difference. But if somebody cares about those 2%, they could use that information. So that was pretty interesting because, for example, if one looks now at a subnet like Ridges or something that has gone up a lot, but had a lower liquidity compared to the others, I would not say it would be that much down because that subnet that had minus 80% was some NetUID 118, so really extremely low liquidity, very high price at the beginning. So I would say Ridges would be somewhere in the middle, probably. So that's something that one really has to look for, is the relationship between the liquidity and the price, if one really tries to think about the subsidy mechanism, because that plays a role how the price will change relatively.
Got it. Okay. Well, Maciej, thank you so much for dealing with my smooth brain and explaining things to me simply like I'm a 10-year-old. I really do appreciate that.
I was able to explain the stuff.
Yeah, no, you were. I need to watch this episode a couple more times. I got a lot more than I knew before this episode, but I think I'm going to need to go over my own episode a couple times in order to really smash it into my brain. But I think you've been very clear and very generous with your time. So thank you very much. Is there anything you'd like to plug, like a Twitter handle or a product, anything you want to get out there?
If anybody wants to learn about Bittensor, then I encourage you to look at learnbittensor.org, which is a website I have started a year ago that I have just worked on because I found Bittensor myself a year ago only. I joined in March 2024, and
Wow.
I was very curious about it, and I thought my own experience was very hard to learn about it because I had to go to Discord, I had to go to Xspaces, I had to go to Reddit, and I had to look through archives of Discord messages and stuff to really understand everything. And I was thinking that it's just very hard, and I wanted to create a resource that I would wished would have existed if I would have joined later. So I created Learn Bittensor, and I'm trying to explain all those things that I, for example, talk about, like the subsidy mechanism, emissions, injection, and halvings and stuff. I'm trying to explain it in an easy, in a beginner-friendly, non-technical way, so that ideally one could show it to everybody and hopefully make Bittensor more accessible.
Very helpful. Thank you so much, Maciej. All right. My name is Mark Jeffrey. This has been Hash Rate. We'll see you all next time.